My son stood up in the middle of a crowded restaurant and called me a loser to my face. And the part that stayed with me was not the word itself. Because at 72 years old, a man has heard enough insults to know that language only has the power you give it. But the silence that followed it, the silence of my ex-wife, Brenda lowering her eyes to her plate, as if the steak in front of her had suddenly become more important than the son she and I had raised together. The silence of her new husband, Richard Lawson, leaning back in his chair with that small, satisfied smirk men, where when they believe another man has finally been put beneath them. The silence of my daughter-in-law, Brittany, blinking slowly with her glossy little smile, pleased that the room had finally been told what she had believed from the beginning. And my own silence, which was the deepest of all, because I did not defend myself. I did not slam my hand on the table. I did not remind Andre who paid for the car he drove, who owned the penthouse where he and Brittany posed for photographs against the skyline, who quietly built the company he bragged about as if it had risen fully formed from his genius. I simply placed my napkin beside my untouched dessert, stood from the table without scraping the chair, looked once at my son, and walked out of the gilded fork while the room pretended not to watch me go. My name is Reginald Covington, and for most of my life I believed that dignity meant absorbing pain without making it everyone else's problem. I built bridges, office towers, municipal buildings, and public works across Georgia. Not with noise, not with flash, but with steel, concrete, mathematics, patience, and the kind of discipline that leaves fingerprints in the world long after your name is forgot. I had learned early that things meant to last are rarely loud. They do not announce themselves. They are measured, braced, reinforced, tested against wind and weight and weather. And maybe that was why I mistook my own restraint for strength for too many years. I thought if I remained steady, Andre would eventually see me clearly. I thought if I kept loving him quietly, without conditions, without demands, without forcing gratitude from him, he would someday understand what had been holding his world upright. I thought a father's work could be invisible and still be respected. I was wrong. Sometimes invisibility teaches the people you love that you are not a foundation. You are empty space. That night, as I stepped out into the cold Atlanta air, I understood that the final support beam had cracked. I was no longer angry in the way people imagine anger. There was no heat in me. There was no shaking. There was only a cold, exact clarity. The kind an engineer feels when a load calculation finally reveals that the structure cannot be saved as it is, that preserving it would only endanger everyone inside. The gilded fork was Richard's choice, naturally. Everything about the place reflected him, polished and expensive without a single honest line. Crystal chandeliers hanging over the dining room like frozen jellyfish, silverware placed with ceremonial precision, wine glasses thin enough to suggest importance before anyone poured a drop, walls covered in abstract paintings that looked as if they had been selected by a consultant who had never felt anything strongly in his life. Richard loved places like that because they made his wealth feel like architecture. He liked rooms where waiters lowered their voices for him, where people looked at his watch before they looked at his face, where a man could confuse being deferred to with being respected. He had married Brenda 5 years after our divorce, and in those 5 years I watched the practical, sharp, capable woman I once knew become a spectator in her own life, measuring herself by handbags, charity luncheons, invitations, and the approval of a man whose entire sense of superiority depended on someone else being smaller in the art. Brenda had not always been cruel. That truth made the later version of her harder to bear. When we were young, she used to sit with me at the kitchen table while I spread blueprints across the laminate surface, asking questions, laughing when I tried to explain tension loads using salt shakers and coffee mugs. She once told me she loved that I built things people could trust. Somewhere along the way, trust became too modest for her. Somewhere along the way, she decided reliable was another word for ordinary. Richard arrived with tailored jackets, club memberships, and a language of winners and losers that infected the family slowly, first as jokes, then as comparisons, then as doctrine. Andre absorbed it most completely, because Andre had always wanted admiration more than instruction. As a boy, he used to follow me through job sites with a plastic construction helmet sliding over his ears, asking why cranes did not fall over, why beams had triangles, why concrete had to cure before you could load it. I told him that rushing a foundation was the easiest way to destroy a building, before anyone moved in. He nodded then like every word mattered. At 5, he was proud to sit on my shoulders in a dusty work yard. At 38, he was ashamed to sit across from me in an old suit that still fit, because I took care of what I owned. That night, my suit was a Hart Schaffner Marx I had bought 20 years earlier, after completing a major civic project downtown. It had been expensive then, but not flashy, navy wool, clean lines, careful tailoring. The sort of thing meant to age with a man rather than chase a season. In that restaurant, surrounded by silk, cashmere, loud cufflinks, and watches designed to be seen from across the room, my suit might as well have been an accusation. Brittany noticed it first. She noticed everything that could be ranked. She glanced at the lapels, at the cuffs, at my shoes, and the small furrow between her eyebrows deepened, as if the simple fact of my appearance reflected poorly on her. She was beautiful in the brittle way expensive objects are beautiful, polished, thin, always positioned for light. She had married Andre after he became, in her mind, a rising tech CEO, and she had learned very quickly to praise whatever version of him Richard admired most. "You deserve it, babe," she kept saying that night, every time Andre mentioned something costly. "You've worked so hard." I watched her hand rest on his wrist, where a watch I had indirectly paid for flashed beneath the chandelier light. Andre was performing harder than usual. He had one arm draped over the back of his velvet chair, his red wine glass held between two fingers, his voice pitched just high enough for nearby tables to hear. He talked about AC tech solutions, as if he had dragged it out of the wilderness with his own hand. He spoke of growth, market capture, expansion, strategic partnerships, and a second round of funding with the inflated confidence of a man repeating phrases he had heard from people he hoped to resemble. "The company is exploding, Richard," he said, leaning forward. "Investors are lining up. We closed the round faster than expected. Brittany is right. It's probably time I upgraded from the 5 series to the 7 series. Image matters now. I can't keep pulling up to serious meetings in something that feels mid-level." Brittany laughed, a bright little sound with no warmth in it. "You're not mid-level, honey. You're elite." Richard nodded slowly, rewarding him. "Ambition is everything, Andre. The world does not remember men who play it safe." His eyes moved to me. "Your father is a good man, a fine engineer, but he lacks that spark. He builds things for other people, never an empire for himself. In this world, if you are not building upward, you are being buried." It was an insult dressed in velvet, the kind Richard preferred, because men like him want cruelty to pass for wisdom. Andre received it like scripture. "Exactly. I try to explain this to Dad all the time. Risk, brand, momentum." He still talks about savings and safe investments like it's 1985. It's just dated. The word was new, but the contempt was not. Last month I was cautious. Before that I was traditional. Before that I was old school. Their vocabulary changed because repetition looks ugly if you do not decorate it. But the message remained the same. "You are behind. You are small. You are lucky. We still invite you to witness our ascension." I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, listening. I knew about the second round of funding. I knew exactly where every dollar had come from, because it had come through the same silent channels I had created 6 years earlier, when Andre came to me with a half-finished proposal for a software company, and eyes bright with hunger rather than readiness. Back then he had called it a platform, a disruptive ecosystem, a scalable productivity layer for small logistics firms. He had used 27 slides, and not one grounded cost projection. He wanted money, not guidance. He wanted applause, not questions. I understood immediately that if I gave him a check in my own name, he would burn it as proof of my belief in him and learn nothing except that a father could be used as a bank. So I said no. I told him my money was tied up in boring retirement accounts. He looked at me with disappointment sharpened into judgment and said, "That's why you never became more than an engineer." 3 weeks later, through Alicia Warren, my attorney and the only person who knew the full map of my financial holdings, I formed a Delaware trust, used it to create Innovate Future Group, hired a retired Stanford PR professor to serve as the public face of the investment firm, and allowed Andre to pitch his idea to people who had already been instructed to believe in him if he showed even minimal seriousness. He walked out of that San Francisco conference room with $2 million in seed funding and called Brenda first. "Not me." Brenda cried with pride. Richard told him he was a natural. Andre later told me the West Coast investors, saw something in him. I smiled and said I was proud. That had been my mistake. Not the money, the silence. I let him confuse scaffolding with strength. I let him believe the stage was the world. Dinner dragged on with the slow cruelty of people, enjoying themselves at another person's expense. Andre spoke of the penthouse at the Oakwood as if the city itself had chosen him for elevation, telling Richard about the view, the way investors reacted when they came over, the gym, the concierge, the private elevator. The landlord basically begged us to take the place, Brittany said, touching her necklace. They said having a young tech CEO in the building gave it energy. I cut my steak into small pieces and tasted nothing. I owned the Oakwood. I had purchased the entire building 3 years earlier through Oakwood Properties, LLC, after noticing the neighborhood was about to transform. The penthouse was never on the open market. The employee incentive lease was a fiction created by the property management firm at my instruction, contingent on Andre's employment status and good conduct. A generous arrangement disguised as recognition. He paid building fees and called himself chosen. The table laughed about Bali, luxury watches, a possible art purchase, Richard's club connections, and Brenda's upcoming charity gala. Every anecdote was placed before me like a trophy. I was expected to admire, to nod, to remain useful by witnessing their superiority. When dessert arrived, a 7-layer chocolate cake placed before me like a monument to appetite I no longer possessed. Richard signaled for the waiter. "The check, please. On my account." He said it casually, but his eyes flicked toward me. Another demonstration, another little performance of power. That was when Andre stood. Maybe the wine loosened him. Maybe Richard's approval had filled him past restraint. Maybe he had been waiting years for a public enough stay. His chair scraped the floor loudly, and several heads turned. "See," he said, gesturing from Richard to me, "that's the difference." Brenda's fork paused. Brittany sat straighter. Richard's smirk deepened. Andre looked down at me, and for 1/2 second before the words came, I saw a shadow of the boy in the plastic helmet. Then he buried him. "Dad, you're a loser. You spent your whole life in that dusty old house, on dirty construction sites. Acting like being careful is the same thing as being successful. Richard is not like that. Richard is a winner." The room held its breath. Someone at the next table looked away too quickly. Brenda did not move. Her silence was not shock. It was permission. Brittany nodded once, almost imperceptibly, as if a verdict had finally been read. Richard lowered his gaze to his wine glass, smiling into it. I looked at Andre, and in that look I let myself see everything I had tried not to see. The entitlement, the borrowed arrogance, the hunger for approval from a man who admired only display, the complete absence of curiosity about how his life actually worked. I expected rage to rise. It did not. What rose instead was certainty. I was finished sacrificing truth to preserve his illusion. I placed my napkin beside the plate, stood, glanced at Brenda, Richard, Brittany, and finally Andre, then walked out. No speech, no threat, no warning. Men who understand structures do not warn a failing building that gravity is coming. Outside, the air was cold enough to clear the restaurant from my lungs. I did not call a car. I walked. The wealthy district thinned behind me, polished storefronts giving way to quieter streets. Then older neighborhoods with real trees, cracked sidewalks, porch lights, and houses that looked inhabited rather than curated. My own home stood beneath an old oak tree, a 2-story brick house I had designed and helped build 30 years earlier. It was not fashionable. It was not dramatic. It was durable. Every wall had been thought through. Every beam had purpose. Inside, the smell of old mahogany, paper, and machine. Oil from the workshop settled around me like something loyal. I did not turn on the television. I did not pour whiskey. Anger clouds judgment, and I needed my mind cold. I walked into my study, the small room at the back of the house where the walls held framed blueprints of bridges, libraries, water treatment facilities, and municipal buildings that had stood through storms people no longer remember. On the corner of my desk sat a silver-framed photograph of Andre at 5, wearing that oversized plastic construction helmet, grinning from my shoulders at a job site. I picked it up and looked at it longer than I intended. Where did I lose that boy? The question did not strike like a knife. It moved through me like fatigue, old and deep. Maybe I lost him when I mistook provision for love. Maybe I lost him when I let Brenda rewrite quietness as weakness. Maybe I lost him because I built too much around him and never taught him to feel the weight. I set the photograph down carefully, sat in my worn leather chair, and powered on my old Dell desktop. It was slow, reliable, unfashionable, like most things I trusted. The screen lit my face in the dark. I opened an encrypted program I had installed years earlier and typed a password no one else on Earth knew. A plain interface appeared with folders whose names would have meant nothing to Andre. Covington Holdings, LLC, Oakwood Properties, LLC, AC Tech Solutions, Innovate Future Group, Project 7 Series, Executive Lease Contract, Richard Lawson Consulting Schedule. Each folder was a hidden beam inside the false structure of my son's world. He could not see the rebar in the concrete, so he assumed it was not there. That night, I decided to test what he had built once I removed what I had supplied. I opened a secure email client. Alicia Warren's address was already saved. For 20 years, she had been more than my lawyer. She was a strategist, a confidant, the architect of every legal structure I created to protect assets from vanity, divorce, taxation, and foolish heirs. The message I wrote contained no emotion, because emotion belonged elsewhere. Subject, initiate sunset protocol. Body, Alicia, we need to meet tomorrow morning at your office, 8 a.m. Begin the dissolution process for all assets related to AC and associated party. Priority 1, the vehicle. Reggie, sunset protocol was the contingency plan we had created years earlier, half practical and half symbolic, for the day Andre's entitlement crossed into something that could no longer be funded without making me complicit in his corruption. I pressed send. The soft electronic whoosh sounded almost delicate in the quiet room. The first domino leaned toward the edge. I slept little that night, but I did not suffer. There are decisions that agitate a man and decisions that settle him. This one settled me. Alicia's office occupied the 45th floor of a glass tower overlooking Centennial Park. All leather, steel, glass, and controlled light. The sort of environment designed to make clients feel both protected and small. It never intimidated me. I had built enough towers to know that even the most impressive lobby depends on calculations buried where no visitor ever looks. Alicia met me at the door of her conference room with a heavy ceramic mug. Black, no sugar, she said, the way you drink it when you mean business. She was in her late 50s, sharp-eyed, silver threaded through her dark hair, wearing a charcoal suit without jewelry except a plain gold band. She had grown up the daughter of a carpenter and never forgot what real work looked like, which was one reason I trusted her. She did not sit behind her enormous oak desk. She sat beside me at the round table, equal distance from the documents, equal distance from the consequences. When I saw Sunset Protocol, she said quietly, I hoped it was a mistake. So did I replied. She studied me. Tell me the human part. I know the structures. I need to know the event. I told her everything, the restaurant, Richard's sermon about winners, Andre standing, the word loser, Brenda's silence, Brittany's smile. Alicia listened without interrupting, only once closing her eyes briefly when I repeated the exact sentence. He believes it, I said finally. He believes he built everything. Then we show him the foundation, Alicia said. Her voice changed then, from concern to precision. She pulled up files on her tablet. AC Tech Solutions, majority shareholder, Innovate Future Group, 60%. Innovate Future Group is wholly owned by the Covington Family Trust, with you as grantor and controlling trustee. Andre holds 20%, non-controlling. Employees and future grants hold the remaining 20%. He is founder and CEO by title, but not by authority. His employment agreement allows termination or restructuring under majority shareholder directive for conduct, fiduciary review, or financial oversight. Corporate accounts can be frozen pending audit. Good. The vehicle, BMW 7 Series leased through Covington Holdings, LLC. AC Tech is merely the authorized user entity. Andre is designated employee driver. Termination of eligibility permits immediate repossession under Section 4, Paragraph B. Good. The penthouse. Oakwood Properties, LLC owns the building. His incentive lease is contingent on qualified executive employment with AC Tech and reputational compliance. 72-hour termination notice is valid if his employment status is materially altered or if tenant conduct brings the property into disrepute. Good. Alicia looked at me over the tablet. And Richard, I felt my jaw tighten. Richard, she opened another document. Richard Lawson Consulting receives $50,000 monthly from AC Tech. Contract terminable at will by majority shareholder directive. From what I can see, it is his only meaningful income. He built his winner image on my payroll. Yes, there was no softness in her answer. We can terminate all four immediately. I looked out the window at Atlanta spread below, all that glass and motion, all those buildings pretending permanence. No, not all at once. Alicia waited. That would be revenge, I said. I want consequence. I want controlled demolition. She leaned back slightly. Explain. When a building has to come down, you don't just blow the base if there are people nearby. You remove it in stages. Fixtures first, then the windows, then the floors, then the load-bearing supports under controlled condition. Andre's life is a structure built with materials he thinks are his. If I take everything at once, he will call it sabotage and never learn. If I remove each support separately, he will feel the purpose of each one. The car first, status, let him stand in the garage and watch the symbol leave. Tuesday, freeze the accounts and terminate non-essential contract. Power, let him learn that a CEO without financial control is just a title behind glass. Wednesday, the penthouse. Security, let him understand the roof over his head was never proof of achievement. After that, he will come to me. Alicia took notes quickly. Legally, staged action is cleaner. Each decision stands independently. Corporate asset management, property management. No single personal attack. Exactly, and if he calls before Wednesday, he will not. He is too proud. And after Wednesday? I looked at my hands, old now, veined, steady hands that had drafted plans, held my son, signed contracts, pruned roses, and now authorized collapse. After Wednesday, I will tell him the truth. The rest of that weekend passed with an eerie quiet. I pruned roses on Saturday, cutting dead canes and overgrown shoots with slow precision. Gardening teaches what sentimental people refuse to learn. If a diseased branch drains the plant, you remove it, not because you hate the branch, but because leaving it there weakens the whole living thing. My phone rang twice while I worked. First Andre, then Brenda. I let both calls die. A week earlier I would have answered instantly, grateful for scraps. Now I set the phone face down on the bench and kept pruning. That evening I reread a biography of Ulysses S. Grant, not the myths, but the quiet man beneath them. Underestimated, unglamorous, persistent, willing to absorb criticism while moving toward a strategic end. The word loser returned to me several times, but it no longer pierced. It had become data. Sunday I went to church, listened to a sermon about accountability, then spent the afternoon in my workshop sanding a piece of old oak until the grain rose smooth beneath my palm. By dusk, I sat on my back porch beneath the deepening Georgia sky, and the name Sunset Protocol felt less like a plan than a weather event already forming beyond the horizon. At 10:01 that night, my computer chimed. Alicia's email contained one sentence. The first domino has been pushed. Monday morning dawned bright through Andre's floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of light that makes a penthouse feel less like a home than a showroom. From the later voicemails, from Alicia's reports, and eventually from Andre himself, I pieced together that he woke satisfied. The restaurant scene in his mind had been a victory. He had finally said what needed to be said. He had set boundaries with his disappointing father. Brittany hummed at her vanity while applying makeup, asking if he wanted to take her Merced since he seemed stressed. No, he said, adjusting his tie. I need the Beamer today. Lunch meeting with potential clients. Image is everything. You deserve to show off a little, she said. After Friday, honestly, you earned it. He kissed her cheek, rode the private elevator to the garage, and stepped out expecting to see his black BMW 7 Series waiting in its reserved space like a loyal animal. Instead, a tow truck blocked it, yellow hazard lights flashing across polished concrete. A large man in blue overalls was attaching equipment to the rear axle. Hey, Andre barked. What the hell are you doing? This is a private garage. The driver stood slowly, unimpressed. You Andre Covington? Yes, and you're about 10 seconds from being removed by security. No, sir. I'm here to repossess the vehicle. Andre laughed because absurdity sometimes reaches the mind before fear. That's impossible. It's a corporate lease. The driver handed him a clipboard. Black BMW 7 Series. Plate matches. Authorized driver Andre Covington. Order issued by title holder Covington Holdings LLC. I've never heard of Covington Holdings. That's between you and them. I own the company that leases this car. The driver gave him the tired look of a man who had watched many people discover they owned less than they thought. Not according to this. Andre called the leasing administrator, rage rising with each automated menu. When a woman named Sarah finally answered, he spoke like a man accustomed to obedience. You sent a tow truck to repossess my car. Cancel it now. Sarah's voice remained smooth. The repossession order was issued at 8:05 by the legal owner, Covington Holdings LLC. The lease is through AC Tech Solutions. AC Tech Solutions is the authorized user. Covington Holdings LLC is the owner and lessor. Under Section 4, Paragraph B, the owner may terminate the lease upon written directive. Put me through to Covington Holdings. There is no public contact number. Communications are handled through legal representatives. This is insane. Is there anything else I can help you with today? By the time the call ended, the BMW's front wheels were lifted. Andre stood in his Italian shoes, sweating through his collar, while the tow truck dragged the physical symbol of his self-image out of the garage and into daylight. No investor saw it. No client saw it. That made it worse in a way. Public humiliation can be fought with performance. Private humiliation leaves no audience to manipulate. His reserved space remained empty, bordered by white lines like a grave. Tuesday took his power. He arrived at the office nearly an hour late after taking an Uber he described in one voicemail as a disgusting little car that smelled like fries and desperation. He tried to recover status by buying coffee and pastries for his executive team at the lobby cafe, cutting ahead with his usual smile and saying, "The usual for the team. Put it on the AC Tech account." The corporate card declined. The barista ran it again. Declined. People behind him watched. The CEO, who spoke about funding rounds and market expansion, could not buy latte. He threw cash on the counter, abandoned the order, and rode the elevator to the 30th floor with his jaw clenched so hard it ached. In his glass-walled office, he opened the financial portal. Access denied. He tried again. Access denied. Password reset. User profile not found. Then the email arrived from the office of the directorate, a phrase he had never seen because he had never cared to understand who truly controlled the company. Effective 9:00 a.m., majority shareholders had initiated restructuring. Executive access to financial accounts suspended. Corporate credit lines frozen. Non-essential spending, vendor contracts, and consulting fees halted pending audit. Andre stared at the words majority shareholders as if they were written in another language. He thought investors were background. He thought capital was applause. He thought governance was paperwork for lesser people. Then Richard called. The winner's voice was high and panicked. "Andre, what is going on? My consulting fee did not deposit. It is never late. I have the lake house payment, Brenda's car payment. Everything is tied to that account." Andre tried to call it a technical issue. Richard screamed, "Technical issue? My entire business is that contract. You told me this was secure. You told me you were in control." The role model became a creditor in under 30 seconds. The man Andre had admired for power revealed that his power was an invoice, paid by a company controlled by the father he had mocked. Andre did not know the full truth yet, but he felt the outline of it moving closer. Wednesday took his refuge. By then, Brittany had heard enough whispers to become frightened. Her salon card had declined. Her friends had called with questions disguised as concern. She paced the penthouse when Andre came home, pale and furious. "Are you losing your company?" she demanded. "People are saying you were locked out." "It's a hostile restructuring," he said. "I'm handling it. You keep saying that and nothing is handled." Then came the knock. Not a neighbor's tap, not a delivery, a clean, hard legal knock. Mr. Harrison, the new senior property manager for the Oakwood, entered with a gray suit and a manila envelope. He informed Andre that the incentive lease had been terminated due to material change in employment status and breach of qualifying condition. 72 hours to vacate. Friday at 5. Brittany broke first. "Where are we supposed to go?" she cried, then turned on Andre. "You did this. Your arrogance did this. Your stupid fight with your father did this. I built my life around your success, and now what am I supposed to tell people, that we're homeless?" Harrison watched with the detachment of a bank clock. "Items left after the deadline will be considered abandoned." He left them standing in a beautiful room they had mistaken for evidence. Andre saw the name at the bottom of the notice. Oakwood Properties, LLC. Another invisible owner. Another unseen hand. Covington Holdings. Innovate Future. Oakwood Properties. Directorate. It was not random. It was coordinated. It was personal. And for the first time, he thought of me not as a harmless old man, but as someone capable of designing a collapse. He called me shaking with rage. "You did this. The car, the company, the apartment. This was you." I sat in my study, looking at the photograph of him in the plastic helmet. "Andre," I said, "it is time we had a talk." He arrived 30 minutes later in a cheap Uber, stormed through my front door, and entered my study like a man looking for the hidden machinery of his ruin. His suit was wrinkled, tie loose, face damp with sweat. "How could you do this to me?" he shouted. "To your own son, to your family. You destroyed everything I worked for." I let the words settle. Then I gestured to the wooden chair opposite my desk. "Sit down. The yelling is over. You had your say at the restaurant. Now you will listen." He sat because something in my voice told him the old rules were gone. I turned the monitor toward him and opened a folder named The Foundation. "You said you worked for everything you have. Let's review your work." I showed him Innovate Future Group's incorporation records, the Delaware Trust, my name as grantor, the shareholder agreement proving the silent investors who discovered him were a structure I created. I showed him AC Tech's ownership, his 20% stake, his lack of control. "You are not the owner of AC Tech Solutions," I said. "You are its highest paid employee." He shook his head, whispering no. I opened the BMW lease. "You did not earn that car. You were authorized to use it." I opened the Oakwood deed. "You were not chosen by a landlord. You were living rent-free in a building I own." Each document struck harder because none of it required my interpretation. The facts sat there in black and white, more brutal than accusation. Finally, I opened Richard Lawson Consulting, $50,000 a month, terminated at will. "Your winner," I said softly. "Your role model, the man your mother chose over me, has one client. Your company has been funded by me. His lake house, your mother's Mercedes, his entire performance of superiority, all of it flowed through the loser he mocked." Andre recoiled as if I had hit him. The last illusion fell. He was not self-made. Richard was not independent. Brenda had not upgraded. They had all been standing on a foundation poured by the man they treated like dirt. I closed the laptop. The click sounded final. "I did not take anything from you, Andre. I took back what was mine." For the first time in years, he looked young. Not innocent, just young, frightened, stripped of costume. "Why?" he asked, and his voice cracked on the word. I looked at him for a long moment. "Because the man at that dinner table was not my son. He was a hollow structure built from my money, Richard's vanity, and your mother's hunger for appearances. I have spent years confusing support with love. I gave you a stage and let you believe it was strength. That was my failure. This is my correction." His eyes pleaded for a door I refused to open. "The trust still exists," I said. "Your name remains in it, but you will not receive another dollar until you learn how to build something real. Get a job, pay rent you can afford, drive what you can pay for, learn what a dollar feels like when it leaves your own hand, learn who you are when nobody is impressed." I stood. "Maybe one day you become a man of substance, not a winner by Richard's definition, a builder. Until then, you are on your own." I left him alone in the study with the truth. There was no victory in it, only grief with a backbone. The days that followed were quiet. No frantic rescues, no hidden payments, no emergencies disguised as family obligation. Andre moved out of the penthouse before the deadline. Brittany went to her parents for a while. Richard's contract termination exposed how little business he actually had. Brenda called a week later. Panicked, shrill, not grieving for Andre, but terrified for herself. "The lake house is in foreclosure. My Mercedes payment failed. The country club suspended me. Richard is ruined. You have to fix this." I sat on my back porch with iced tea, jasmine in the warm Georgia air, crickets beginning their evening chorus. I listened until she ran out of accusation. She said I owed her. She said I was jealous. She said I had destroyed everyone because I could not stand seeing them succeed. There was no apology for the restaurant, no concern for the son whose false identity had collapsed, only a demand that I restore the life she had mistaken for hers. When she finally stopped to breathe, I looked out at the darkening yard and felt the last chain between us turn to dust. "Brenda," I said quietly, "that is no longer my problem." Then I ended the call. The silence afterward was not empty. It was clean. I leaned back in my rocking chair and let the rhythm return. For 72 years, I had believed being strong meant carrying weight without complaint. I know better now. Strength is also knowing when to set the weight down and let the people who placed it on your back feel how heavy it always was. I had not destroyed my son. I had destroyed the lie that was destroying him. Whether he rebuilt from the foundation or stayed buried in the rubble was no longer mine to decide. That was the hardest lesson of all. A father can build shelter, but he cannot become another man's spine forever. The loser at the table had built their entire world. The loser had also learned, finally, how to walk away from it.